what I've heard from another NDEer, and this fits really well with my experience, is what we can do to make the world better is with our daily interactions with others, our family, our friends, our coworkers, that just by being good to them, by helping whoever we can, by trying to have a positive interaction with others, like that's what we can do. That's how we can make the world a better place. And it actually does matter, and it does end up affecting the world as a whole. And that's kind of what resonates with me is that that's the best I can do because there's all kinds of stuff I can't control directly. So, um, what I can do to help other people or just be good to other people,
Yes.
that's how I can make the world a better place. And so that's what I try to focus on.
Yes. What you can control.
Yeah.
So, did you see anything on the other side, Aaron, regarding souls that were refusing to incarnate? And if that was the case, where would they be?
All right. So I think it depends on basically they would be stuck where they were. When before this life, I didn't want to come back to Earth. And I told my guides that I was like, I don't want to go back. I'm not going back. And I remember told them, and you can't make me. And they agreed that they couldn't make me come back. And I said, basically, I'm just going to stay here. And I was in like a midway realm. It wasn't good or bad. It was just kind of neutral. And I would have just stayed there. And it seemed like I would be there for, just like forever kind of thing in a timeless realm. And I wouldn't be able to advance. And the guides were, you know, they recognized that that was kind of like a waste for me to just stay like that and not advance to better, higher levels. And I think also, like when I first started out, when I was first created, um, if I had refused to come to this physical reality, I think I would have just stayed in that state, and it was reasonably happy, but it was so much less um, than what awaits us.
Mhm.
And all my other friends, the souls around me, they would have gone and they would have come to Earth, and I'd kind of be left there alone. And I think what inevitably happens is we have guides that encourage us and they point out the positives, the benefits to us, and so eventually we agree.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that's what would happen to any soul that refused to come back to Earth is eventually they would recognize that, hey, they're just kind of stuck and they're not really progressing, and they just need to come back and go through the difficulty, and then they'll be able to progress to something higher.
Mm. Um, are they there? Do you remember if you were there with other like-minded souls or family souls or?
Okay, yeah. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
Based on my experience, what I saw is when we first come to Earth, we come with what's called our soul group.
Mm.
If you remember from my experience when I first started out, I was with a group of a whole bunch of other souls, and we were all together, and we were close on a spiritual level. We have a deeper connection. They're kind of like brothers and sisters on a spiritual level.
So
And
cute.
when you first come to Earth,
Yeah.
you come with those that soul group. It
Mm.
makes it an easier transition. You're close to them in life. And as we progress, we get to where we come with fewer and fewer, and then eventually we don't necessarily incarnate with a soul group, and it makes it more challenging, which might sound bad, but then it gives you greater opportunity for growth. And one of the things I saw when planning this life is that I was going to be working with like uh, some different people that were all part of the same soul group,
Mhm.
and that somehow my interaction would help them. But for me, I wasn't necessarily coming back specifically with members of that group, but that there was a couple people in my life that there was like there was a plan for how my life was going to go. And so they used a couple that my guides used as the plan, a couple people from my soul group, because they would have a like a deeper connection to me, and I would feel a certain way, and my guides were able to use that to get me to take a certain path. And so that was planned also. Um, so I guess when you're first starting out, you're going to be with your soul group all the time, but as you progress to higher and higher levels, you're not going to be with them when you incarnate as much.
Mm. And I guess you meet other souls that you connect with and bond with that are
Yeah,
outside of your soul group, and you might reincarnate with them once or twice or three times or
right.
and then build those sort of connections as we keep going thousands of incarnations later, hundreds.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking it's I don't think it's thousands. I think
Okay.
it's less than that.
Okay.
Obviously I don't know, but my guess would be I don't 100, kind of in that ballpark. Not
Okay.
like not like we're coming back hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times or anything like that. Just I think it's a little bit less than that.
Okay. So if you think the sense that you got that it's about 100 incarnations, where to from there with the God source that you've spoken about?
Uh, I think most of us end up working for a while in some kind of spiritual level, like as a spiritual guide
Yes.
or something like that, and we get to where doing that kind of work helps us to uh, evolve spiritually even further. But I don't know for sure. That's just kind of what it seemed like. So some of these guides that I worked with, like they had obviously been to Earth many times, and I got the impression that as souls leave Earth, they have different jobs waiting for them, or they like choose different jobs
Yeah.
that whatever works for them. And when I say job, that's something that they really enjoy. It's something they want to do. It's not like on Earth where we have to go to work to make money and eat.
Yeah.
But on the spiritual level, it's like something they really enjoy. They're very passionate about it. It's much better.
Yes.
And I think when we're done with Earth, we eventually get into to doing some kind of work for the benefit of others.
So do you think our grandparents, our siblings, our parents that cross over wait for us before being reincarnated? I've always wondered that because I sense my grandfather around a lot. There are
Okay.
at different times I've sensed him, and he passed away when I was 17. And then I think, well, what about if he needs to come back? Like, is he
Right.
waiting for a bunch of us to finish this journey? Or I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, what I think is that the majority of souls are doing well enough that they're at an appropriate place or level where they can really enjoy themselves in the afterlife. And I
Mm,
think most of these souls they spend a period in the afterlife enjoying themselves. Just they're with others, they're having a good time. But when a relative or friend dies, they can transition into like the neutral realm and meet them uh, when they cross over. And so I think some of our relatives and friends are going to be there to meet us, but some of them won't. Some of them will have already decided to come back and reincarnate. I've heard other people mention that there's kind of like there's part of us that's not incarnated,
mm,
that's not here. And I don't completely understand it, but uh, it could be that we can still meet these souls even though they're uh, living on Earth. But I don't really understand how that would work. I don't.
yeah. But one of the questions is that we're allegedly we're meant to be living for a lot longer than the 80 to 100 years.
Okay.
Did you see anything about that? The fact that I call it, this is our avatar, our physical avatar.
Yeah.
Do we have
Um,
we have a spiritual body and this is our physical avatar? They're
right.
saying that we should be living for a lot longer.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I did see something that's kind of related, where it was like humanity will eventually get to the point where we could keep these bodies alive essentially forever,
Yes.
and that's actually a big problem. Like a lot of people think it would be great to live forever, but spiritually, it's actually a huge problem. And I saw that, like eventually in the distant future, humanity would get to where they could live forever, and it causes spiritual problems. And it's kind of like souls are stuck here until they like make the decision to die, which could take a long, long time, and that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Mhm.
But as far as like we're supposed to live, over 100 years, 200 years, I don't know. I couldn't really say.
Wow, Aaron, you've just blown my mind. And that makes so much sense. So you were able to have a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, I guess it was like a distant future. It was like this one specific problem where there was people who were still living, all technology had been mastered and they understood how to keep bodies alive and
Mm,
they were like stuck. It's kind of like if you were playing a video game and you're just stuck in the video game forever, and it's a problem. Obviously, it's a problem, and that this
Yeah.
was going to be a problem for some people in the distant future.
Because death is actually a way out of so many things. It's a because
Yeah.
we can only grow to a certain degree sometimes spiritually, and you need to sort of do a reset and start again and
Yeah.
recalibrate, work out with your spirit guides where to next, what's the next best experience. And if you're not able to do that and go back to base,
Hmm.
and you've stopped growing spiritually, you
Right.
may have become quite a negative and evil person, and now you can't reset and go back to base.
Yeah, and whatever your physical reality is, like my life is it's going well, it's fine.
Mm.
But it's nothing compared to like a heavenly realm. And to just be stuck here forever when I could be enjoying myself in a heavenly realm, it's obviously it's not good. It's not what we're meant to do.
No. And so, how is it that we're being allowed? And again, there's not this interference going on where it's sort of where we're being allowed as a collective and as a human species, this free will business
Hmm.
to sort of it's organically just happening as it is with all of its corruption and all of its evil and all of its
Right.
problems, and no one's coming here to save us from ourselves.
Yeah, it's up to us to figure it out. And through trial and error.
Yeah.
And we make mistakes, people make mistakes, and then they get to receive the consequences of those mistakes. And through that process, they learn.
Mm.
And so eventually, as time goes on, as we go through more and more lives, we're going to get better and better at this. And we're going to, stop killing each other, stop stealing from each other, that kind of thing. And, eventually things will get better and there'll be less wars and we'll stop doing this dumb stuff that we see in the news all the time.
But we may end up getting stuck here because we get so good at overcoming
Right.
all disease. Or
Yeah, it wasn't like everyone's going to be stuck, but it certainly seemed like there's going to be a handful of souls that are just kind of stuck as people and they won't let go and they just hold on. And but that seems like I don't know how far in the future, but way, way in the future.
when you did see your avatar being shaped and taken place, and you were selecting every feature and all of that, um, did and you it was explained to you that if you make these life choices, you will have potentially these types of problems, or maybe it wasn't explained, but there was this beautiful symbiotic understanding that this,
Right. It was kind of like self-evident
yeah.
for a lot of it. Some things weren't quite as self-evident, and there my guides would point it out and explain it to me. But you got to understand, I was much more intelligent. My understanding was much higher, and this was all very one decision would have a bunch of self-evident consequences, and it was all kind of you know, you, like I knew what I was doing. I knew I understood what I was picking and what the consequences were. And it was very easy. It wasn't convoluted or difficult at all. In that setting, it was very easy to pick what I wanted and understand the consequences. And especially with the guide's help, where anything I might have missed, they would point out to me.
Do you remember the environment that you were standing in when you're is it almost in front of a huge big computer screen that's five-dimensional, and you're picking your body and the organs and your DNA features and
Well, the way it looked to me is like everything, it was black in all directions, and I could see the body and I understood all the different consequences and picking different ways it would look, different heights, intelligences, hair colors, and that's just kind of what it looked like. It wasn't to where I was like picking one strand of DNA or another strand of DNA. That was kind of all behind the scenes, and I didn't really care or need to focus on that. I was focusing on how it would impact my life and what it would look like.
Mm-mm. So fascinating. So it's like being in a, those movie theaters, and you put on the 3D goggles almost,
Uh-huh.
where it's pitch dark and then you can see the body, the formation, but like you're saying, not to the nth degree of you're going to be blood type B minus, or
Right.
but if that
Right.
was
Yeah, I
relevant,
don't. Yeah, I donate blood sometimes, so maybe it is a little bit relevant, but
yes,
I don't
that's
remember picking like blood type.
But I
Oh,
suppose if it was relevant, like for example, my brother-in-law,
right.
he suffered with hemophilia. And I believe
Okay.
that maybe that's an illness as part of his karmic journey or just his journey that he selected that
Yeah.
be born with that.
Yeah, a lot of this was kind of like unintended consequences. Like I had really bad acne as a teenager,
Mm,
and that was the unintended consequences of all these other choices I've made. And that was something my guides pointed out to me, and I needed to agree to it because it was above some level of difficulty that then required my agreement. But another thing that I think is kind of interesting is my guides, after I picked this body, my guides pointed out, hey, all the genetics are there for you to have a club foot. And we looked at that, and it wasn't really a benefit to my life. It wasn't a benefit to my friends or family. It would just make life a little bit more difficult for me, and it just didn't help me with my spiritual progression. So we passed on the club foot, which I think is kind of interesting. And I recently talked to a distant cousin who actually saw an interview I had done, and he contacted me, and he told me that he had a brother or sister who had a club foot. I thought that was really interesting because I'd never heard of anyone in my family who had a club foot, and here's this distant relative that told me about it. But anyway, those genes were all there for me, but I passed on it, and I just have
no,
a
a
typical
normal
foot,
foot.
a normal
Yes.
foot. Yeah.
It's incredible to that level, and yet somebody selected it, I suppose. Or did it
Right.
accidentally happen and it was like, surprise, you're born with a club foot. We didn't discuss it.
Yeah, I don't think there's that kind of accidents. Maybe it happens sometimes, but I think the majority of these things they're for our growth, they're for our development, and they serve a purpose.
Mm, mm.
Overcoming these difficulties helps us spiritually and helps us advance ourselves.
Seeing children suffering
Right,
kills me since becoming a mother. And I'm sure since becoming parents, most parents feel this way.
right.
And then that's how you sort of hear people saying, I don't believe there's a God. There's no way that a God would allow these innocent babies, children, toddlers to go through such hellish experiences on this planet. Without me putting words in your mouth, how do you see this situation and these beautiful babies, children suffering?
Yeah, it's hard. I recognize that, and it does seem like how would God allow this to happen? Um, I think it's important to remember that these difficulties from a spiritual perspective, and I realize they're horrible, and I'm not trying to minimize any of that, but from a spiritual perspective, they're brief. Um, one lifetime is relatively brief in the grand scheme of things, and as hard as it is for these children and for everyone that's going through something really difficult, there is a much greater spiritual benefit to them. They can essentially learn a whole lot really fast from a spiritual perspective, and they will have so much progress that they themselves thought it was worthwhile to go through that difficulty. And I recognize that there's a lot of atrocities going on in the world, and if I'm able to stop any of it, that's what I'm going to do. And but I'm not. This is where we are, where people are going through difficult things, and you got to remember that this planet was made to be difficult. Like it's supposed to be challenging, and the reason it's challenging is because it kind of like forces our souls to grow, to change these challenging environments, these really great difficulties. Well, there's a corresponding growth that goes with that, and that's why we're facing these difficult things, and children too. I don't like it either. I can't stand to see children suffer or anyone.
Mm,
But I recognize that there's a benefit to it. There's a reason for it. God has a plan. It's not always going to be like that for these souls that are going through these difficult things, and that in the end, it'll be beneficial to them, even though I know it's really hard right now.
mm. Thank you. The one thing that I try and tell myself is it's also maybe deceiving, and please correct me if I'm wrong, deceiving from the point of view that we see a child and a baby, and that's all we see. We see a
Right.
two-year-old avatar, a two-year-old human body, but in that body could be a soul that's incarnated 50 different times
Oh yeah,
or
absolutely.
100 different times and is actually older than me and
Hmm.
wiser.
Yeah.
and has made these choices to grow and also, in a way, maybe push humanity forward, or the group that's watching the suffering and experiencing it alongside the child, to pushing them to grow for whatever reason by going through this
Right.
trauma. But all we see is a 2 year old or a 5 year old.
Right.
And really, it could be a soul that's twice my age.
Yeah, could be. Another thing, you know, I kind of hate to say this, but I will. I saw during my life planning that in a previous life, I had gotten in a fight, I had beat someone up pretty badly, and then in this life, I was going to have my nose broken, and go through a difficult experience. And think about, what's fair for some of these people who are dropping bombs on other people, who are deliberately blowing up civilians. How can they learn and understand that this is not a good thing? Well, one way they can learn and understand is if they go through the same thing that they're putting other people through. And maybe they want to do that because that's the fastest way to learn. The fastest way to learn that something's bad is to experience it for yourself. And for some souls, that's probably what's going on. Not all of them. I certainly don't know everyone's unique reason for being in this difficult situation. But for some souls, they may be just receiving what they had previously given to others. And as awful as it is, they will learn, and they won't want to repeat that kind of activity.
Yeah. And I think that too.
And ironically, as much as we hate watching that, there's a
Killing
benefit
me.
to us. There's a benefit to us because I see this death, this destruction, and I hate it. And there's a spiritual growth for me
Correct.
just for watching this horrible thing, and like, I don't want any part of it. I don't like it. I wish it would stop. But that's on a spiritual level, and that actually helps me grow and develop and become more peaceful and loving.
Correct.
And so the world, in its own way, they benefit from seeing these atrocities because we recoil against it, and we recognize that this is bad, this is awful, and that kind of like helps us with our growth a little bit.
Do you think that some people choose to be evil in this lifetime? And I think we've discussed this to help push humanity forward, like the Hitlers of the world, who
Right.
potentially said, I'm going to be a real horror to help you guys. I don't
Yeah,
know.
my thoughts are that that I don't know, but my thoughts are that there probably is some times where that's planned, but also I think there's souls that uh, they might turn down their guide's advice. The guides might say, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't do this. You're going to have too much power, and you're not ready to handle that power, and
Mhm.
you're going to set yourself up for some negativity in the future." And they might say, "I want the power anyway." And then they come to Earth and they abuse their power, and they didn't really mean to. They didn't mean to get themselves in that situation, but they did. But God understood exactly what was going to happen with them when they had that power and adjusted all the other plans accordingly. And so God kind of twisted around. So even though it's horrible, it's still for our benefit. And that God kind of that these souls don't necessarily intend to become a really evil person, but based on the choices they make, that's just the path they head down, and that God and the guides can plan everybody else's life around that, such that it still kind of ends up working out in the end for everybody's benefit.
Um, Female and male souls. What did you see about gender on the other side?
Yeah, it definitely seemed to me that at the highest levels, there's no gender. Like when we first start out, we're all just souls, just orbs of light. And as far as I could tell, when we come to Earth, we tend to prefer one gender or the other. So most of our incarnations are in one gender. Like most of the stuff I saw from previous lives, I had been a male, but I've been a female also in previous lives. But I'd say like, I don't know, 90% of the time I've been a male. Um, and that when we leave life, uh, when we go back to the afterlife, at the like the lower levels of heaven, we still have what looks like a physical body, and we still have a gender in those lower levels of heaven. But as we progress to higher and higher levels, we leave behind these earthly ideas of what we're supposed to look like, and the idea that we're male or female, and we kind of progress to a more pure form of consciousness. And in those higher levels, there's not like male and female. We're just consciousness or just ourselves.
Mm.
So I don't think that gender is an inherent trait to souls, but um, when we die, most of us are probably still going to have a form that looks just like their earthly body. But as they progress to higher and higher levels of heaven, they'll kind of move past that, and they won't need that physical body anymore to be comfortable.
Mm. With respect to Jesus, he's in a male body, what it appears like to many people when they even cross over.
Right.
I know you didn't actually see him, but what are your thoughts on that? Because he would be at the highest level of consciousness, or is that just how he's appearing to us when we cross over to make us feel
Right.
comfortable? I don't know.
Yeah, I think these higher level souls can take on whatever appearance they want to, and if if Jesus's consciousness wants to interact with the person, they might be most comfortable seeing him as as he looked like on earth. But that's not who Jesus is. Jesus is a higher level soul, and that physical body was just, it was just who he was 2,000 years ago. So I think the reason they see him and he looks the same is because that's what they expect him to look like. Not that there's any kind of need for him to have that appearance.
Did you see animals on the other side?
Yeah, actually that was something I wanted to bring up.
Ah.
It so specifically what there's a couple things I saw. One was uh, that talking to my guides, they made it clear that there was going to be two dogs, and I was going to be helping those dogs with their spiritual progression. Okay,
I
these are
love
two
animals.
dogs I have during life, and like that was like a deeper connection. One of those dogs I have right now, and we have a great connection. But it was just obvious as day that these dogs have a spiritual, a soul, that they're going through a spiritual journey just like us. Um, and then another time, I thought this was kind of interesting. This was just a brief snippet from a previous life where I had been starving, and there had been a flock of geese that flew overhead.
Mm.
And when I died, I had asked my guides about it, and I was like, why couldn't you send these geese down so that I would have something to eat? I was starving. And the guide said, well, they have their own spiritual journey too, and they have their own plan for how they're going to live their life. And if they did that, they wouldn't be fulfilling their plan, and they wouldn't be progressing as they were intended to. It was that kind of answer, but it was clear that they had their own spiritual journey, just like people do.
Yeah.
So the idea, the concepts that we need to be good to others, be loving, kind, compassionate, those extend to animals as well. We need to be try to treat animals well, don't mistreat them, don't abuse them, that kind of thing. It should be pretty obvious. Um, and that all these animals have their own spiritual progression too. Um, the big question I have, and I'm not sure about this, is there a difference between an animal soul and a person's soul? And I don't quite understand. I don't quite have the answer, but it seems to me that it's one and the same. There's not really a difference there. That we start out at the lowest levels, um, and that means some kind of low level animal, and we progress up as far as we want to.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know. But what I do know for sure is that animals have a soul. They have their spiritual journey, and that we should try to be good to them.
Mm. And so, how does that make um, you feel about the fact that we eat animals? Or
Yeah. Well, I'm a vegetarian now,
mm,
and personally, I don't really mind people eating animals so much. It's the mistreatment of the animals that are in the food industry that I have a problem with.
yeah,
Uh, we have I live in Virginia in the United States, and we have what's called the Eastern Shore of Virginia. It's kind of off to the coast, and there's a whole bunch of chicken farms there. And I was driving through there with my family one time, and we saw this chicken truck, and there was probably 3 or 4 thousand chickens in these little bitty cages, and they looked terrible. And they were going to a processing plant to be made into chicken nuggets or whatever. And it's like, I, I just don't feel right about that kind of treatment. I think it's too bad. I feel like we could do better. We could, even those people that want to eat animals, like you could treat these animals better. and make their journey a little easier without too much difficulty. So I kind of think everyone's got to make their own decision about whether they want to eat animals or not, and that's entirely up to them. Like that's their choice. But what I would encourage is, hey, if you're going to eat these animals, can't you treat them just a little better? It seems like this is a little uh, like it's excessive. It's not appropriate treatment.
Absolutely. And do you think those animals to some degree choose to come into these lifetimes knowing also in the same way that humans do, coming into
Right.
atrocious living conditions and suffering? It's the same for the animals being in, ending up on abattoirs and living in cages and
Right. Yeah, I think it's basically the same. They're spiritually simpler than we are, and they need to learn, and you learn through experience, and going through some really difficult experience for those animals, it helps them progress and helps them move to higher levels.
mm,
But that being said, just like with children, if I could prevent their suffering here as a human, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to minimize that as much as I can.
of
Any kind of
course.
difficulty they need. Look, life is hard enough. They're going to get the experiences they need. That's not something I need to worry about. What I need to worry about is how can I make it easier for them? How can I make it better for them? Less suffering. So that's my goal. But at the same time, I recognize that each of these animals that goes through some sort of experience, even if it's really difficult, it's going to help them on their spiritual journey. Just the same with people.
Yeah. I was going to talk to you about a topic that I'm not sure how comfortable you feel talking about it, and that's suicide.
Okay.
And whether
Yeah,
you,
yeah, I can talk about that.
yeah, and whether you saw anything about that when you were on the other side, and whether you were given any information.
Yeah, I was actually. I think it's interesting because I don't think it really applies to this life per se that I'm living right now. But while I was planning out this life, I was shown a series of short clips or things that had happened in previous lives. And one life was in the distant past, some kind of primitive society. Life was very hard, and I was up on a high cliff, and I was fed up with life, and I jumped and I died. So I committed suicide uh, maybe thousands of years ago. I'm not sure when this was.
Mm,
But when I had died, my guides had showed me that this is not something we're supposed to do, that what I had done had made it more difficult for my friends and family in that life, and that I was going to need to go back and face those exact same challenges again until I could overcome them. But the second time I faced those same challenges, it was going to be a little bit more difficult. And the guides basically explained that it's going to get more and more difficult until you can overcome it. Like it has to get more difficult each time so that you can like surpass what you felt at before. And that if you continuously make this same decision, there's going to be like a much, much more difficult, like spiritual reckoning. As I understand it, we would basically, if we repeatedly committed suicide, we would need to go to some sort of low level spiritual realm where we could feel the full weight of those decisions, and um, and by spending some period in that difficult realm, it would give us the fortitude, it would give us the strength we needed to then go back again to Earth and overcome that. It was like guaranteed that if you went through that, when you came back to Earth, you would be guaranteed to overcome your temptation to have suicide. So I would advise against suicide to anyone. I know life is really hard. I understand that. But you've got to overcome these difficulties, and you can overcome these difficulties. And you'll be glad that you did. And you can't escape these difficulties just by ending your life soon. It doesn't work that way. Um, but if you can persevere and go through life and go through these difficulties, I know it's really hard, that it's going to be worth it, and you'll be glad you did.
mm. Thank you so much. Just can't end the game because you're gonna be sent
Right.
back in.
Right. You're only making things more difficult by trying to take the shortcut, by trying to take the easy
Why
way
do they
out.
have to make it more difficult, Aaron? Why can't they make it equally as difficult?
Right. I think it's kind of like you've got to like prove you know I guess I don't know. I couldn't really explain it, but it was clear that like it would be a little bit more difficult every time you commit suicide. What you would have to overcome would become more difficult. And I guess I don't really have a good understanding of why, but that's what I was shown.
Aaron, remembering all of these things when you were a little kid, and then all these memories were stored away that we discussed in part one. And now that you finally remembered it, and the fact that you're sharing it with the world, you've had millions of views on some of your documentaries in America. So millions of people have watched this story. Was this part of your destiny? Did you see any of this when you discussed with your guides that you were going to have this impact on people?
I did see a couple things. As you know, I used to do this interview in my closet.
Yes.
Uh, when COVID hit, I made like a little office in my closet because
Yes.
I lived with four teenagers at the
Mm.
time and a
Yes.
wife and a dog. Um, but I knew there was a significance about having my desk in my closet. I didn't quite understand at the time, but I knew there was something about it. There's something I was going to do in there that was important or had some kind of meaning. But I now think it's these interviews I did. The other thing I saw was that I was going to write a book,
Mm.
and that somehow my book would be important. I don't really understand, but maybe it would help some people, and that's something I'm working on. Is this book?
Wow.
I've been working on it for like 5 years. I'm ready to finish it, but I guess I'm a bit of a perfectionist. But I saw that those two things would somehow be helpful and help humanity progress or whatever, and that those were important to me.
Mm. So just to re-summarize, when you were on the other side in this near-death experience, out-of-body experience, you did see that you were going to be sitting in your closet office. You saw a picture, you saw an image of that in the future.
Well, the book, what I saw during my near-death experience was the book, and
Mm-hmm.
and that it would be controversial, but that it was there was an importance to it. And I didn't see during my near-death experience this closet thing. That
Mm.
was more like when I was setting it up.
Mm.
I I, I don't know if my guides were telling me or somehow I felt that hey, there's something more to this, and that this is important.
You were able to go into the future of Aaron's life and see that there
Right,
was some kind of book that you're writing that has significance to it, will be
right,
controversial, but will help people.
yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't know exactly what that book was about, obviously.
Just about like I knew that it was about my experience, but I
Right.
didn't no details. I didn't know, but this is the only book I'm working on, and this is something I've been working on a long time. I'll be glad when I get it finished and get it out. And this isn't some kind of money making scheme.
Oh,
It'll be freely available to anyone who doesn't want to have a physical copy. They could download it for free. It's not like I'm trying to make money by writing a book. I just want to share my experience, and it seems like a book is a good way for some people to hear about what I went through and hopefully get a little bit better perspective on the spiritual realm and how everything works.
fantastic. Do you have a name for the book yet?
Emerging from the light.
Emerging from the Light.
Yeah.
Wow. And you have quite a following. There are people that watch your interviews all over in every, broadcast that you've done and on every channel. They follow you
Yeah,
around and
yeah, it's kind of nice. There's some people that definitely connect with my experience, and they seem like they watch multiple different interviews that I've done, which I very much appreciate. And I'm thankful that some people are able to connect with my experience and relate to what I'm saying, and so that helps keep me moving forward. That my experience hopefully is beneficial to them.
absolutely. I love some of the feedback and comments that I get regarding your interviews, and it's just beautiful. People saying, "Oh, it's just what an incredible story, or has so much information, or that was the best interview, or it's just
Right.
it's fabulous. Makes me
Yeah,
feel like
I appreciate that feedback.
mm,
When I did my first interview, um, how I thought it would play out and what people would connect with is very different than what people have connected with. And so it's kind of a surprise to me, but I'm happy that, uh, you know, I do feel like I saw some important things that would be beneficial or helpful to people to see. And so I'm just trying to share what I can and hopefully people can benefit.
I think so. It puts me at peace hearing your stories and hearing your experience, and your understanding that you've gained as a result of what you've seen, the way that you've been able
Right.
to piece things together, and your understanding of our soul's evolution. It is so helpful. We need to be teaching this sort of stuff to kids at school.
Right. Yeah, I've thought about that. Maybe I should, if I do okay with this book, I might make a kid's book that explains it all in a much simpler, picture-based way,
Yeah.
just very straightforward. I feel like there's a lot of biblical type books out there that are, the Old Testament stuff is all over the place, and the our spiritual nature and what I consider to be a near-death experience type of explanation is kind of lacking out there, especially for kids.
If we could get this sort of information into, I'm almost seeing even a movie. Like, why can't we get someone to make a
Right.
movie out of this experience? Um, it this is how we teach people about what's really going on,
Right.
and how we become a less primitive society and a more evolved society that understands that being kind and being nice to one another
Right.
is
It's
the
important.
most important thing.
There's something I heard from another experiencer where, the deep connections with one person are more important than the kind of shallow connections with a whole bunch of people.
Mhm.
So if there's, some people I could connect with deeply and hopefully help them, then that, what I'm hoping for is that it has a meaningful impact on their lives and they're able to live a better life and progress better.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. We'll see during my life review
Yeah, that's
how I've
right. That's
done.
what I'm thinking. I'm always afraid of that life review. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, do not show me that. If you make me watch that again, I am just going to storm out.